Hey everybody, I'm Kevin. This is Design Magic. This is before I had Metal Magic. This was probably, well, this was my first, in my opinion, my first big design idea. And had I known, it actually was patentable. And the way I found out is 10 years afterwards, there's a drag racing idol of mine, Bill Grumpy Jenkins, in an advertisement in Hot Rod magazine showing my exact rocker arm. Exactly the same philosophy. So there's the first thing you need to learn. If you have an idea and you think you're the only person in the world that's got that idea, you're probably wrong. And so if you think you need to patent it, well, that's probably one of the first things you do is a patent search to see if it may be already out there. In the case of my rocker arm 10 years later, he had it patent pending. I can't find it, which kind of tells me he maybe didn't bother spending the money. He locked it in long enough to see if the product was going to sell. That's how I see it. I wish I could find the magazine. I don't know how to search that kind of stuff. I'm not sure that I got the patience either, because I don't think it'd be that quick or easy to do. So, but anyway, I designed a set of rocker arms for a small block Chevrolet. I wanted it to be a ratio of 1.7 to 1. However, when I would do a layout, it showed that I couldn't do that without moving the rocker arm stud. So that means pulling the rocker arm stud, plugging the hole, re-drilling it in a new location, and reinstalling the stud. So when I started the project, I was just going to stick with the idea of it's going to be a 1.5 to 1 ratio, which this was a high school project for me. This was my senior year, and it was just something exciting for me in my mind to do. And certainly I couldn't afford a set of aluminum rocker arms. Believe it or not, they're a lot cheaper now. And when I say cheaper, they may actually be higher in cost, but when you consider you know, how much money I had to work with back in 1975 compared to the amount of money people have to work with today, they're definitely cheaper, and that's because of CNC casting processes, just a whole myriad of technologies have improved to such a point that the cost of making them has gone down dramatically. So here's let's see, I'll use this picture here. Let's use this picture to start with. And I'm sorry about this. I really have the rocker arms. However, they're not here with me. They're at my father's house, and I would have to dig them up, but I need to get this video made, so I'm going ahead and just using my pictures for now. Later on, when I get a chance to go down to his place, I'll pick them up and I'll show them in another video. So here we go. Now, the one you're looking at on the right, that one is my prototype. The one on the left is my production model. After making the first one, I came up with ways to improve it. Like any project like this, you come up with an idea that's good, but if you're open-minded, and that's the way you should be constantly looking for ways to make it even better. That, I think, is the downfall of a lot of people when they're designing and coming up with ideas. They get their first idea going and they just run with it. And even though after a while all the signs say you need to stop and back up and reconsider, they don't do it. They just keep on going. And I will admit, it is difficult to back up because you think you're losing time. But you really have to look at the big picture. The places I've worked at where I dealt with engineers, they almost all had this problem. They could not start over. They could not stop and finally say, all right, I'm heading the wrong way. So remember that when you're coming up with ideas. And like I say, it doesn't matter what it's about. It doesn't have to be a mechanical thing. It can be in any place where you need to come up with ideas to make things better is a place where you need to be able to step back from your own project, listen to what other people are saying. So now, after I made the first one, I actually ran it on a car, and it worked. I then went back and reevaluated what I was doing. In this picture, wait a second, let me get it here, I'm sorry. In this picture you can see marks in the hole. Those are chatter marks. Well, I had to, of course, eliminate that problem. The roller in the front there. Wait a minute. See how you can see the roller? Well, in this one you can't. That's because I realized I could make it stronger, and it was actually a better, and it took no more machining time, is how I should word that. Another thing is the taper in the back here. I eliminated that. Yes, I could have saved a little bit of weight, but it was insignificant. And I noticed that other rocker arms weren't made that way. I'll show a picture overhead. Now the one on the right is my prototype. You see how I have the one on the left is just a clean slot front to back, where the one on the right I have it opened up in the center there. So what I did was I ended up making the rocker arm narrower, and I realized I didn't need to take and cut all that material out. Now here's the thing about this rocker arm that made it trick and made it the 1.7:1 ratio. Look at the hole in the brass piece. It's off center. It's moved towards I call it the front of the rocker arm. What that does is that it shifts the pivot point back. So the pivot point now is not in the middle of the stud. It has the same effect as moving the stud. So I was able to get the 1.7:1 ratio. But how did I come up with that idea? Well, I'm not ashamed to say it. It was a mistake. I had marked the brass piece to drill it, and I had a dull bit, and when I drilled in, it walked off center. Now, I could have thrown it in the trash and gone back and done what I, machined it where I wanted it originally. But something in my head said, I think that's going to solve the problem I've been trying to solve, is getting my 1.7 to 1 ratio. And sure enough, it did. When I did a layout, it was enough there. Now you can say, well, it's going to weaken it. Well, yes, but not enough. That's just a pivot point. So in the end, that ended up actually being the secret to the 1.7 to 1 ratio. And yes, that is exactly what was in that advertisement in Hot Rod Magazine 10 years after I made my parts. And now here's just one last picture. Shows the two parts again so you can get a comparison of them. Now you're going to say, well, the rocker arms nowadays use bearings. They actually have needle bearings in them, maybe roller bearings in some cases. This is just brass against aluminum. Brass and aluminum will wear pretty well against each other. I wasn't really looking for these to last forever, but I wanted them to function. And I didn't have the money to buy all those needle bearings, because if you don't know, you have to have 16 of these to go on a small block Chevrolet. So I just hoped that, the brass against the aluminum would work, and it did with my test part. And when I saw the advertisement, well, theirs was a little different. They had coated the pivot, the brass piece, they coated theirs with Teflon, but it had no bearings in it. It was the same idea that I was, and they did it to save costs. They were selling these for street use. They weren't really a high-end, high-performance rocker arm. One of the things I guess I need to bring up too is I made a prototype. I had to then come up with a production plan for my parts. That chatter that was in that hole, I had to make my own tool for boring those holes to get them to the right size for what I needed. I also had to start out with more parts than what I had to finish up with, knowing that I would probably make mistakes along the way, and I did. I scrapped parts. In fact, I remember I started out with 26 parts, and I barely got my 16. But I did get it. None of this was done on CNC machines. This is all manual machines. I had to use rotary table, index head, and as I said, making some of my own tooling, coming up with ways to locate the part for each step along the way. I could not machine the whole thing in one setup. I really haven't counted, but I'd have to say I have it's about 10 different setups, to make these parts. And it took me the whole school year, but part of that was the last the last thing you need to be ready to do if you want to try to design, is having the stick-to-itiveness. I ran out of steam about halfway through the year. I lost interest, and I went off and started messing with a go-kart that I had with a 2-speed manual transmission in it. I messed with that for a while, but as the year started, you know, even back in February, I could see the year was running out. I knew I was going to have to get back on them because I really did want to finish them. And so I did. It took me up to almost the last day, but I got it done. And I won the Industrial Arts Award because of that. So if that means anything to people out there, so out of everybody that took wood shop, machine shop, VOAG, I think industrial arts as well, maybe it was even art, I took the award. So, you know, I wasn't planning on that, but that was a little bit of a reward or acknowledgement for my effort. Just a shame I didn't know that they were worth what they were, which actually this is one more thing. People are going to tell you if it was a good idea, somebody would have already thought of it. You know, yeah, it looks like a good idea, but there's probably something out there better. That can't, you know, it's not worth patenting. You know, you'll never make anything off of it. Well, that's what I was told by my own father. And I can't say my mother encouraged me much, although I do think she's the one who got me to go to college, which, you know, if you watch my Why Me videos on my I'm Not Childish channel, you might kind of wonder whether that was a good idea or not. Well, I got it done. I now can finish up another little project I have going on so that I can link it to this video. That was why I had to make it. And now I can move to the next step, which is just like anything else. I set a plan in place and now I'm going through my steps. You know, I'll get it done and I'll move on to something else after that, and hopefully something will come of it. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if there's anything you got questions about. I'd love to hear from any of you. And I hope that this is encouraging to you. Thanks a lot from Design Magic.